Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. The laws at the heart of STELAR were first developed 30 years ago with the distant signal laws in the 80s, when the marketplace was far different than it is today. And most consumers watched over-the-air broadcasting, and those who wanted alternative to broadcasting later in the 90s weren't held with the same amount of competition that they got from cable, and we made changes to the law to bring in more competition. So it is no wonder that when the original STELAR law was necessary in order to inject essential competition for services, the idea was to help get these competitors off the ground and facilitate driving down costs to consumers. The STELAR law allowed those companies to provide consumers with distant broadcast TV stations with the expectation that these would help in providing competition to the marketplace. 30 years later, consumers have a multitude of video options, that is for sure. But the two satellite television providers are mature competitors in a marketplace with millions of customers. Whether Congress ends the distant signal STELAR laws now or in the future, we must be sure that consumers are not left in the lurch. Certainly, consumers will find a way to access content that they deserve, but the obligation should be those who most strongly advocating for the end of STELAR to prove that they do have plans for what happens afterwards. These issues are so important, Mr. Chairman. I hope that we will ask important questions today about what are the changes of the video marketplace for the future that are really going to add value to the American consumer. We know that Americans have many more choices, but in some instances, more choices than they want or want to pay for. We want to make sure that there is true competition among these platforms and not just capturing consumers and charging them higher fees. A recent report suggested that big cable is engaging in custom billing practices that add hundreds of dollars to consumers' bills each month. Consumers are rapidly losing the diversity and localism that often drives our interest in video. The larger media conglomerates are buying up the competition, leaving little room in the market for new entrants with unique perspectives. And it's an open question whether these massive media conglomerates have the same commitment to the public interest on television that we had enjoyed before from our local broadcasters. So these are important issues. I see with the FCC, they're perfectly happy to continue policies that I believe undercut national policies that support local broadcasters. Stations no longer have to maintain a local studio, but the agencies were resounding defeat in the Third Circuit. The FCC was perfectly happy to facilitate nearly unfettered consolidation among broadcast stations. These structural changes that are happening in a very disruptive environment raise, I think, important questions that I hope our committee would deal with, which is what is the future of local journalism? I've had the pleasure of sitting down with dozens of Washington State broadcasters last August to talk to them about how they are charting this path forward. These stations are trying to chart a path through these various changes in technology while continuing delivering award-winning quality journalism. But they raise some important issues with me. Ad sales at the stations are dropping due to competition with online platforms. Viewers are migrating away from traditional cable and satellite, preferring online options that do not always carry the broadcaster stations. And the shift is starting to drive down the revenue stations gain from their distributing partners. They're facing contentious carriage negotiations with ever larger cable companies, and negotiations often result, as the chairman just mentioned, in blackouts that can last for months. Stations are having to pay license fees back to their network partners that then erode their gross revenue. And now broadcast networks are investing in their own direct-to-consumer online video platforms that may draw must-have content away from the local stations. I think all of this is important, Mr. Chairman, because I want to see continuation of local broadcasters. They are about our public interest. The journalism, the public service provided by these truly local broadcasters and their commitments to our communities are important to the health of our democracy. So I hope as we look at today's hearing and hear from all those participating, we will be able to chart a path forward. We do want consumers to have more choice. We're glad that there is more content, but we here have to keep our eyes on these important issues of protecting the consumers and protecting local journalism. I thank you, and I look forward to hearing from the witnesses.